You always say negative stuff about me.
Shedeur Sanders has confronted the Browns' owner in a clash that's shaking the NFL. From Rex Ryan's humiliating takedown to Shedeur's bizarre silent protest to whispers that Cleveland's front office buried him before he ever took the field, this is an explosive showdown you'll need to see. The unprecedented fall. The NFL is built on dreams, but behind the polished helmets and billion-dollar contracts, those dreams often crash into the hard walls of politics, egos, and power. And no story right now captures that brutal reality more than what's happening with Shedeur Sanders, the son of primetime himself, Deion Sanders. Shedeur was supposed to be the next, not just another quarterback prospect. He was billed as a game changer, the player who would carry his father's legacy into the NFL spotlight. But instead of being celebrated, he's been publicly humiliated by analysts, demoted by coaches, and quietly buried by the Cleveland Browns ownership. Going into the 2025 NFL Draft, Shedeur Sanders wasn't just considered a good quarterback prospect. He was being projected by multiple analysts as a potential #1 overall pick. This wasn't some media hype machine running wild. This was based on cold, hard statistics and tape that showed a quarterback who had absolutely dominated at the college level. During his final season at Colorado in 2024, Shedeur threw for 4,134 passing yards, 37 touchdowns, maintained a jaw-dropping 74% completion rate, which was the best in all of FBS college football, and threw just 6 interceptions. Read those numbers again. A 74% completion rate with 37 touchdowns and only 6 picks. Those are video game numbers, ladies and gentlemen. Throughout his entire college career spanning Jackson State and Colorado, Shedeur amassed 11,498 passing yards, 107 touchdowns, and just 24 interceptions across 45 games, with a career completion percentage of 71.8%. Professional scouts were raving about his accuracy, his poise under pressure, his ability to make off-platform throws, and his leadership qualities that had literally revived programs under his father's coaching. Mock drafts from reputable analysts had him going as high as #2 overall behind Miami's Cam Ward, with projections to powerhouse teams like the Tennessee Titans or the New York Giants.
The Cleveland Browns have announced that their third-round pick, Dillon Gabriel, will start Sunday against the Minnesota Vikings in London. When asked about Gabriel getting the starting job, it literally left Shedeur speechless.
Then something absolutely unprecedented happened on draft night, April 24th, 2025, in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Something that would send shockwaves through the entire football world and raise questions about whether we had just witnessed one of the most blatant examples of collusion and discrimination in modern sports history. Shedeur Sanders, the quarterback who was supposed to be a top 10 pick, who was supposed to be a franchise savior, who was supposed to hear his name called early on that first night of the draft, he waited and waited and waited some more. The first round passed, then the second round, then the third round, then the fourth round. And it wasn't until the fifth round, pick number 144 overall, that the Cleveland Browns finally traded up to select him. Let me put this in perspective for you. This was being called the biggest slide in NFL history. We're talking about a drop more dramatic than Aaron Rodgers in 2005, more shocking than Lamar Jackson in 2018. This was a fall so steep, so unexpected, that it immediately triggered a national conversation about what had really happened behind closed doors in NFL war rooms across the country. And here's where things get absolutely wild, because almost immediately after the draft, allegations of collusion started flooding out. NFL legends like Eric Dickerson came forward claiming that there had been a league-wide blackballing of Shedeur Sanders. Boomer Esiason reported on WFAN that multiple owners had literally ordered their general managers to remove Sanders from their draft boards entirely, with direct quotes of owners saying, "Take him off. I don't want that guy." Think about that for a moment. We're not talking about scouts having concerns about his 40-yard dash time or his arm strength. We're talking about powerful billionaire owners allegedly coordinating to ensure that a talented black quarterback with a famous father and a flashy persona didn't get drafted where his talent said he should be drafted.
Absolutely. Absolutely, because whatever he says, they're going to twist his words. If you say nothing, there's really, on any other team, there are 31 there are 31 other teams. Do any of those media members talk to the third string quarterback?
No.
Oh, it's controversy. Why create controversy? How do you not create it? By when they ask you questions, just don't answer.
The theories for why this happened are as numerous as they are disturbing. Some insiders suggested that NFL owners resented Deion Sanders' disruption of traditional power structures in college football. Others pointed to racial undertones, the discomfort with a black quarterback who wore diamond watches, drove luxury cars, had lucrative NIL deals, and wasn't apologetic about his success or his family's wealth. Still others claimed that Shedeur's innovative contract demands, which reportedly included equity in team merchandise and media rights, could have upended the entire NFL economic structure, and that terrified the old guard. Former Congressman Jamal Bowman argued that the NFL was afraid of strong black men who refused to conform to white corporate expectations. Music mogul Uncle Luke and podcaster Joe Budden echoed similar sentiments, calling the draft slide a blessing in disguise for exposing the biases baked into the league's power structure. The comparisons to Colin Kaepernick's blackballing were immediate and unavoidable, but the NFL and various teams pushed back hard against these allegations. They pointed to legitimate concerns that had emerged during the draft process. Reports detailed that Shedeur had bombed multiple team interviews. Anonymous coaches described him as unprepared for playbook installations, overly aggressive in questioning teams' cultures, and at one point, he allegedly took a FaceTime call in the middle of an interview. One anonymous coach called it the worst formal interview I've ever had. There were concerns about his refusal to work out at the NFL Combine, choosing instead to only interview with top 7 teams, a strategy that spectacularly backfired. Scouts anonymously criticized his body language on the sideline, his tendency to blame teammates when things went wrong, and what they perceived as a fundamental lack of humility that the NFL typically demands from its rookies, especially late-round picks. And then there was the Deion factor. Deion Sanders, Shedeur's father, publicly limited the cities he deemed acceptable for his son, comparing it to Eli Manning's famous draft refusal. He threatened to expose critics who called Shedeur arrogant. This Sanders Inc. approach, where it felt like you weren't just drafting a player but inheriting an entire family circus, made risk-averse general managers extremely nervous about pulling the trigger.
But he's not a 5th-round pick, so we shouldn't ask him to act like a 5th-round pick because that's not what we believe he is. For me, look, if he'd have took the pro, say, look, I'm happy for Dylan.
Right.
Hopefully he goes out there and plays well. Joe, I feel bad for Joe, but this is the game of football. This is a business, and hey, I'm just, I'm happy for Dylan, and my job doesn't change.
Right.
I go out there, I prepare.
So when the Cleveland Browns finally selected Shedeur Sanders with the 144th pick in the 5th round, it felt like something. Was it a team taking a chance on a talented player who had unfairly fallen? Was it a franchise breaking an alleged pact among owners? Or was it something else entirely? Browns GM Andrew Berry defended the pick, saying, "The time we spent with Shedeur and what he's done throughout his college career is impressive." It sounded like a vote of confidence. It sounded like a team that believed in their guy. But what happened next would reveal that not everyone in the Browns organization shared that belief, and that's where this story takes an even darker turn. The owner's betrayal. If you thought Shedeur Sanders' draft night humiliation was the worst of his troubles, you haven't heard anything yet. Because what happened next is something I've never seen in all my years of covering professional football. We're talking about an owner, the man who literally signs the checks, the man whose organization just spent a draft pick on this young quarterback, publicly distancing himself from that very same player before the kid even threw his first professional pass. On July 29, 2025, at Browns training camp, owner Jimmy Haslam, a billionaire worth an estimated $8.5 billion from his pilot-flying J truck stop empire, held a press conference that sent shockwaves through the NFL. When asked about the Shedeur Sanders pick, Haslam stated, and I quote, that the decision was 100% Andrew Berry's decision. He emphasized that he had absolutely no input whatsoever and that he personally preferred other quarterback prospects in that draft.
Yeah, we know.
Joe Flacco was in Cleveland once before, and they let him go.
Yeah.
He was in Indy. And he wasn't, let me get this straight. He wasn't the answer the first time around in Cleveland. He wasn't the answer in Indy. He wasn't the answer at the Jets, but now he's going to be the answer this time around. Joe Flacco hadn't been the answer since 2012 when he took the Ravens to the Super Bowl, and that's it.
Now you might be wondering, why would an owner do this? Why would you publicly sabotage your own draft pick before he's even had a chance to compete? Well, according to insiders, Haslam was reportedly trying to appease other NFL owners who were furious with the Browns for breaking what was allegedly an unspoken agreement not to draft Shedeur Sanders. Remember, the Browns were already in the doghouse with the league after giving Deshaun Watson that fully guaranteed mega contract, and apparently this was seen as yet another example of Cleveland refusing to play by the establishment's rules. So Jimmy Haslam threw Shedeur Sanders to the wolves to protect his own reputation, and the message was received loud and clear, not just by Shedeur, but by everyone watching. This kid wasn't welcome in Cleveland. The owner didn't want him, and if the owner doesn't want you, what chance do you really have? But Shedeur Sanders, to his credit, didn't crumble. In media sessions following Haslam's comments, he responded emphatically, "I'm here to prove them wrong. Actions speak louder." He talked about earning respect through his play, about focusing on what he could control, about blocking out the noise. It was exactly the kind of response you'd want from a young quarterback facing adversity: mature, focused, professional. Despite showing promise in the preseason, going 14 of 23 for 138 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions in his debut start against the Carolina Panthers, Shedeur found himself buried on the depth chart. The Browns brought in veteran Joe Flacco, a 40-year-old quarterback who hadn't been the answer for any team since winning a Super Bowl with Baltimore back in 2013. They also drafted Dillon Gabriel, a third-round pick from Oklahoma, and had Kenny Pickett, a former first-round pick from the Steelers. Now, on paper, competition is healthy. Competition makes everyone better, but this wasn't normal competition. Reports from Cleveland's training camp indicated that Flacco and Gabriel were getting first-team reps while Shedeur was relegated to running scout team offenses. He wasn't being given the same opportunities to showcase his abilities. He wasn't being given the same coaching attention. He was being systematically marginalized. And when the regular season started, guess who was listed as QB3? The third-string quarterback, the emergency option, the guy who only sees the field if 2 other quarterbacks get hurt. That's right, Shedeur Sanders, the kid who threw for 4,134 yards and 37 touchdowns in his final college season. The kid who scouts had praised for his accuracy and leadership. The kid who, by all accounts, had done everything asked of him in the preseason and in practice. He was QB3. The Browns started the 2025 season 1-3, and head coach Kevin Stefanski made a quarterback change. But he didn't turn to Shedeur Sanders, the guy with the elite college stats and the supposed franchise quarterback potential. No, Stefanski benched Joe Flacco and named Dillon Gabriel the starter for the upcoming London game against the Minnesota Vikings, with Flacco moving to QB2 and Shedeur remaining QB3. Let that sink in. The Browns are 1-3. They're struggling. They need a spark. They have a quarterback on their roster who believes he's capable of playing at a high level right now. And they're going with Dillon Gabriel, a third-round rookie who, while talented, doesn't have anywhere near the college resume or the upside that Shedeur Sanders has. And here's where things get really interesting, because Shedeur's response to this situation has created yet another massive controversy that's dominated NFL headlines for weeks now. On October 1st, 2025, during a Wednesday media session, reporters gathered around Shedeur Sanders to ask him about the quarterback change, his role on the team, his feelings about still being QB3, and his development under Joe Flacco. Standard questions that every NFL player gets asked, especially when there's been a significant change at their position. But Shedeur Sanders did something absolutely unprecedented. He refused to speak, not in a hostile way, not by walking out or cursing at reporters. Instead, he silently mouthed answers to every single question, pantomiming responses without making a sound. His lips moved, forming words that cameras could capture but ears couldn't hear. It was a form of silent protest, a statement without words, and it immediately went viral. The media and analyst reaction was swift and brutal. Dan Orlovsky from ESPN called it embarrassing and immature. Rex Ryan, who had previously criticized Shedeur on ESPN, doubled down, saying there was no time and place for such antics from a QB3.
That's a great piece of television from Rex Ryan. Hats off to Rex and ESPN. So we're finally, this speaks to a cultural change. This is a black quarterback he's talking about, and he's talking pretty salty and spicy about him. And I think he's talking accurately about him. He said, if I know other coaches around the league are talking about it, you're lazy, you're not a leader, you're not at the front of the meeting room, soaking up everything you can.
But here's what the critics were missing. Shedeur Sanders wasn't being immature. He was being smart. He was being strategic, because every single time he opened his mouth, his words were twisted, taken out of context, and used against him. When he showed confidence, he was called arrogant. When he expressed belief in his abilities, he was called entitled. When he supported his teammates, it wasn't genuine enough. And when he said nothing at all, he was criticized for that too. His mother, Pilar Sanders, came to his defense, blasting Rex Ryan and other critics as cancerous and envious. She pointed out the double standard. When other quarterbacks show personality and confidence, they're praised as leaders. But when a black quarterback named Sanders does it, especially the son of Deion Primetime Sanders, suddenly it's a problem. And you know what? She had a point. Because if you look at how other third-string quarterbacks are treated in this league, none of them face this level of scrutiny. None of them have microphones shoved in their faces every single day. None of them are expected to answer for coaching decisions that have nothing to do with them. The fight for his career. So where does all of this leave us? We have a supremely talented quarterback who fell in the draft under suspicious circumstances. We have an owner who publicly distanced himself from that quarterback before giving him a fair shot. We have a coaching staff that keeps him at third string despite questionable quarterback play ahead of him. And we have a young man who is fighting, not just for playing time, but for his entire NFL career and reputation. Because make no mistake about it, if Shedeur Sanders doesn't see meaningful playing time this season, if he can't prove himself on an NFL field in 2025, his career might be over before before it even really began. And that's not hyperbole. That's the brutal reality of being a fifth-round pick in the National Football League. Analysts and former players have warned that this situation could bury Shedeur's career permanently. Because once you get labeled as a problem player, as someone with character issues, as someone who isn't coachable, fair or not, it's almost impossible to shake that reputation. Teams talk to each other, scouts share notes, and if the Browns decide that Shedeur Sanders isn't worth the trouble, what makes anyone think another team will take a chance on him? The path forward for Shedeur is narrow and treacherous. Right now, Dillon Gabriel is set to start against the Vikings in London. If Gabriel plays well, Shedeur might never see the field this season. If Gabriel struggles, there's still Joe Flacco waiting in the wings as QB2. And even if both of them fail spectacularly, there's no guarantee that Kevin Stefanski turns to Shedeur, not with the owner having already made his preferences clear, not with the organizational dysfunction that seems to permeate every level of this franchise.
It's just unusual to see the starter get benched. And, well, I guess it's common because when Russ got benched, Jackson Dart came in to start and Russell went to the backup.
Right.
So I guess it's not as unusual as we might think it is. You're like, well, hold on. Flacco got benched. Shedeur was already third. Shouldn't everybody just like move up a spot and the guy jumps back? But that's seemingly not how they did it because Brian Daboll said that Jackson Dart would start the rest of the season and Russ would serve as his backup, and Jameis stays where Jameis is.
But let's say, hypothetically, that Shedeur does get his chance. Let's say injuries happen, or the Browns fall to 1-7 and decide they have nothing to lose by seeing what the kid can do. What then? Well, the pressure on him would be absolutely immense, because he wouldn't just be playing to win games. He'd be playing to prove every scout who doubted him wrong. He'd be playing to justify his father's unwavering belief in him. He'd be playing to show Jimmy Haslam that he made a massive mistake. He'd be playing to vindicate everyone who suggested that his draft slide was racially motivated collusion rather than legitimate concerns. And here's the really terrifying part. Even if Shedeur plays well, it might not be enough because the narrative has already been written. The media has already decided who he is. The NFL establishment has already made up its mind. And changing that narrative requires more than just good play. It requires sustained, elite, undeniable excellence that makes it impossible for anyone to question whether he belongs. Look at what happened to Lamar Jackson, who also slid in the draft amid questions about whether he could play quarterback at the NFL level. Lamar didn't just have to be good. He had to win an MVP award in his second season. He had to revolutionize the position. He had to be so spectacularly talented that doubters looked foolish for ever questioning him. And even then, even after all that success, he still faces criticism and skepticism when things don't go perfectly. That's the standard Shedeur Sanders is being held to, not the standard of a fifth-round pick, which would be, can he develop into a serviceable backup? The standard he's being held to is, can he immediately prove he should have been a first-round pick and make every team that passed on him look stupid?
But it's a situation, Ocho. People want to see him succeed or they want to see him fail, but they want to see him on the field.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to, Ocho.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see him on the field and I want to see him sink or swim.
Now, I want to address something that's been bothering me throughout this entire saga, and I want to be very direct about it. The racial component of this story cannot be ignored, no matter how uncomfortable it makes people. Multiple prominent black analysts and former players have pointed out that there is a very specific type of scrutiny that gets applied to black quarterbacks, especially those who are confident, stylish, and unapologetic about their success. When Tom Brady shows confidence, he's called a winner. When Josh Allen talks about believing in himself, he's called a leader. But when a black quarterback does the same thing, especially one with the last name Sanders, suddenly it's arrogance, it's entitlement, it's a character flaw that needs to be corrected. Stephen A. Smith compared Shedeur's situation to Colin Kaepernick's blackballing. Even former President Donald Trump weighed in, calling NFL owners stupid for letting Shedeur fall so far in the draft. A fan actually filed a $100 million lawsuit against the NFL, claiming slander, collusion, and discrimination in how Shedeur was treated during the draft process. Now, does that mean every criticism of Shedeur Sanders is racially motivated? Of course not. There are legitimate questions about his pocket presence, his tendency to hold the ball too long, and whether his college success will translate to the NFL. Those are fair football discussions that should be had about any quarterback prospect.
I understand you're both rookies, but say something like, hey, I'm excited to see him, be a professional. And then the entire thing of miming, Jay, I'm like it's something out of a child's playbook. And the idea is like, oh, he's responding to Rex Ryan. You are a quarterback in the National Football League. Why are we responding to Rex Ryan on ESPN when all he really says is you should be starting, but it's your own behavior? So you double down, triple down on the own behavior narrative? Like, Jay, that position, more than any position, you need a leader of men.
And you know what else isn't fair? The fact that Shedeur Sanders has conducted himself with remarkable professionalism and maturity throughout this entire ordeal, yet he's still being painted as the problem. When he was drafted in the 5th round, he didn't complain. He didn't demand a trade. He said all the right things about being grateful for the opportunity and ready to prove himself. When Jimmy Haslam publicly disrespected him, he didn't fire back. He focused on his preparation and his work ethic. When he was buried at 3rd string, despite showing well in the preseason, he continued to support his teammates and work on his craft. And when the media kept asking him questions designed to create controversy, he found a creative way to protest the unfair treatment without being overtly disrespectful. Yet somehow, Shedeur is still the bad guy in this story. He's still the one with the attitude problem. He's still the one who needs to earn opportunities that players with lesser resumes are given freely. Yet somehow, Shedeur is still the bad guy in this story. He's still the one with the attitude problem. He's still the one who needs to prove himself, despite having already proven himself at every level he's played. So what happens next? What's the end game here? Some analysts believe that if Shedeur doesn't see the field this season, the Browns might cut him or trade him for pennies on the dollar. Other teams, seeing how Cleveland has handled the situation, might view him as damaged goods and stay away. His NFL career could effectively be over by the time he's 24 years old. Not because he wasn't talented enough, but because he was never given a fair chance. But there's another possibility. Maybe, just maybe, Shedeur Sanders gets his opportunity. Maybe injuries force the Browns' hand. Maybe the team falls so far out of contention that Stefanski decides he has nothing to lose. Maybe some sequence of events finally opens the door for Shedeur to step onto an NFL field as the starting quarterback.
That's what it comes down to, because all this talk, well, he shouldn't have been this or he shouldn't have been that. Now he's going to either prove a camp right or he's going to be proven wrong.
Right.
But so they want to say, okay, we see, now that's why he slid to the 5th round. Man, I don't know how, y'all see how he playing? He should have never been in the 6th round. I mean, the 5th round.
And if that happens, if Shedeur gets his shot and seizes it, we might be witnessing the beginning of one of the greatest prove them wrong stories in NFL history. But I'll tell you this, regardless of how this story ends, it has already exposed some uncomfortable truths about the NFL that can't be ignored. It has shown that talent alone isn't enough if the people in power don't want you to succeed. It has revealed the double standards that black athletes face, especially those who refuse to be humble and grateful for every crumb they're given. And it has demonstrated that even in 2025, in a league that prides itself on meritocracy and competition, there are forces at work that have nothing to do with football ability and everything to do with control, power, and maintaining the status quo.
I agree with you, Ocho, because my brother used to tell me all the time, I say, man, you know, I've been in training camp, Ocho, and I'll be like, man, I ain't getting no reps today. Or I'll be in practice, you know, once I made a team. He said, don't worry about it. He said, one day, John Elway gonna call on you. He said, just make sure when he call your number,
You better be ready. Got to be ready.
Shedeur Sanders' career is at a crossroads. The next few weeks and months will determine whether he becomes a cautionary tale or an inspiration, whether he's remembered as the kid who fell because he wasn't good enough or the kid who fell because the system was designed to make him fail. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.